So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Alvarado, and I'm gathered here with my group mates, Nyoko Brown and Cynthia Rivas, and we will be presenting on the human experience of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Here's an overview of the key main points that we will be touching upon. The first will be an explanation of what Duchenne muscular dystrophy is. The second will be a psychological analysis of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. The third will be a neurological, an explanation of neurological disorders and research studies. The fourth will be treatments and therapies for DMD. And the fifth will be an explanation as to why DMD research is not all-inclusive. So for our first point, what is Duchenne muscular dystrophy? Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a genetic mutation linked to the X chromosome, mainly affecting boys. It is a recessive genetic disorder which disables the ability for the dystrophin protein to be made. This protein is essential for the function of muscles and can cause muscle cells to become weak and make them prone to damage and wasting. Too much activity can be dangerous, therefore special accommodations are needed for these patients. Oftentimes, these accommodations can lead to a psychosocial and neurological alterations as patients start to become conscious of their disability. Moreover, patients with DMD require multidisciplinary care. Therefore, therapy and mental care should be emphasized. Oftentimes, the mental aspect can be neglected by parents and researchers, especially within underserved and underrepresented communities. Research needs to be adjusted to focus on these aspects of the disease along with focusing on the management of the onset of symptoms and other phenotypic alterations. So our second point, we will be discussing the psychology of DMD. So how does DMD affect the psychology of children? The reality of DMD is that it is not an easy disease to deal with. The constant medications coupled with the inevitable progression of the disability can be frustrating for a child to comprehend. Therefore, here are some examples of how DMD may affect the child's psychology. Firstly, children may feel chronic pain from the degeneration of their muscles. Oftentimes, pain and medication can be a common side effect. Chronic pain becomes an obstacle for daily contentment. With the progression of DMD, children may lose ambulation and will develop physical limitations. This disrupts their physical activities, which often starts to take an effect on their ability to play with other children and takes an effect on how they travel to and from daily locations. With their physical limitations comes social exclusion. With their lack of physical abilities, children may start to feel socially isolated, as they may feel misunderstood or they may feel like a burden to others' lives. Moreover, children with DMD may soon become aware of their disability and develop neurological disorders and other psychological problems when they reach a mature enough age. More on this later. Additionally, their social exclusion and isolation begins to take an effect on their ability to form relationships, as they soon find it difficult to connect and communicate with others. Lastly, DMD becomes an obstacle for daily activities. Children with DMD cannot keep up with normal children as they have an altered schedule that requires them to routinely attend medical visits and other therapies to continuously treat the progressive disease. So, psychological symptoms. Given that DMD is a progressive disease, children soon start to become cognizant of their declining health. Research has shown that a child may begin to show symptoms of depression by the age of 7, when he becomes more conscious of being physically different from other children. Additionally, another way in which anxiety can manifest itself in children with DMD is by maintaining rigid expectations and overly concrete reasoning, which can cause a child to have difficulty adjusting to unexpected circumstances or changes in routine. This can trigger agitation and emotional reactivity, including oppositional behavior, arguing, and emotional outbursts. Moreover, motion is a means to express oneself and to communicate, and it is quite possible that DMD may have an effect on motor expressiveness. Thus, there is a tendency to refuse contact with the outside, in which they may not feel understood. These effects on socialization may become barriers when forming relationships. So up next, we will be talking about neurological disorders and a case study. According to research conducted in 2018 that was studying psychosocial management of patients with DMD, they found that approximately 32% of patients had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, 26% had learning difficulties, 17 to 27% had an intellectual disability, 27% had anxiety, and 15% had autism spectrum disorders. Early interventions are critical in the development of children, which can minimize the compounding impact of any delays over time. With this being said, all providers should be mindful of the psychosocial functioning of DMD patients and the impact on their families. Moreover, providers can continue to play an active role in developing psychosocial supports across the patient's lifespan. Providers can also help patients think about their future, as well as empowering the patients to actively participate in their own care and daily activities. In a research paper studying the psychological aspects in children affected by DMD, researchers studied how children view themselves via drawings of themselves and their family. Here we see an example of a family drawing test, in which the patient revealed themselves to be self-depreciated with experiences of marginalization and isolations in relation to the family. They depict themselves as separated or on a different plane. This was common amongst 85% of children who took this test. Another example was the self-drawing test, where children were instructed to draw themselves. This, of course, allowed them to self-reflect and draw an image of how they see themselves. Most drawings were drawn in static poses, and many children commenced their drawings by starting with their lower extremities. This could signify that these children seem to focus a lot on their ambulatory functions and how their abilities are different from other children. Additionally, researchers found that for other children that depicted a walking human figure, they typically drew themselves with characteristics of a mild dystrophic gait. One last example was a spontaneous drawing test, in which children could draw really anything. In this test, children's drawings expressed depressive content. Some examples of what children drew were houses with broken windows and holes, night landscapes, and drawings with scarce uses of color. In this drawing, we see an example of a child's autobiographical episode, where he draws him and his father taking a ride on the ship to another town for a medical visit. These aspects of life have become so ingrained in the child's mind, so much so that it dominates how they view their daily lives.
So I wanted to go ahead and touch base on possible treatments and therapies for DMD patients. So the first treatment that I wanted to focus on was narrowing down on the possible burdens that may be put on families with a family member who has DMD. It is an incredibly intrusive disease that affects both the patients and the family members, such as the parents, by putting possible financial and emotional stresses on them. The parents oftentimes have to serve as both a provider and caretaker, which can affect their mental health. A possible treatment to these stresses may be to implement the presence of a care coordinator. A care coordinator is oftentimes referred by a physician, and they can serve as a mediator in situations like this. Again, they serve as a medium of communication with the physician. They aid in the relief of emotional burdens. They can also help and schedule and coordinate DMD patient appointments. They can answer any concerns or needs that the family may have and provide guidance when making medical decisions. This in turn can lay off some of the stresses that the families may adopt as time goes on and the disease progresses. I also wanted to focus on a possible clinical treatment, in this case being myoblast transplantation. So myoblast transplantation is the injection of genetically normal myoblasts from healthy donors that target the missing gene of dystrophin, and in turn, this repairs the damaged muscle. And that picture on the right goes ahead and shows the transplantation. So I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about a study done by Gussoni and others. In this study, they examined 8 pre-implant muscle biopsies where there was no dystrophin of DMD patients. They injected myoblasts into 80 to 100 sites on the tibialis interior of one of their legs. So they went ahead and examined the muscle tissue a month after the transplantation, and they observed production of dystrophin factors. That figure on the right goes ahead and shows the production of the dystrophin after a month. The lighter circles are the dystrophin that are actually produced after that month. So this in turn shows that the myoblast transplantation has been successful in restoring some of that dystrophin that is lost during the development of DMD.
So I'm going to talk about why DMD research is not all-inclusive, and I'm going to do so through a simplified flowchart. So here from beginning to end, we're going to see how Black patients with DMD are essentially denied proper treatment. So research regarding Duchenne muscular dystrophy is not accurate for all patients, as people are led to believe. The goal of current DMD research is to characterize disease progression and quality of life. But unfortunately, observational studies on DMD are highly likely to exhibit selection bias. One study, which was titled Characterizing Enrollment in Observational Studies of DMD by Race and Ethnicity, looked at highly cited observational literature on DMD and found that only one of the 14 studies they examined included more than 7.5% Black participants. US clinical trials of the treatments adasolonexton and eteplirsen have 100% and 98% white cohorts, respectively. While many studies on this topic willingly admit to a lack of resources preventing Black individuals from participating in clinical research, too many of these same studies are willing to also blame Black participants' mistrust of medical research. In reality, it is more appropriate to label this phenomenon a history of medical abuse. Blaming Black participants for volunteer-based research not being inclusive is dismissive and harmful. This dismissive train of thought has had real consequences for Black DMD patients. Currently, researchers do not know the racial and ethnic makeup of the US DMD population. Because of this gap in knowledge, the true natural history of disease progression cannot be considered accurate, and valuable conclusions about the quality of life across the DMD population cannot be made. Even the most cited works on DMD are not culturally inclusive. So it's safe to say that our knowledge of the disease itself is not culturally inclusive. Despite there being so few Black participants in observational DMD studies, there is still a significant enough racial disparity for one study to still find that Black patients are less likely to be treated with corticosteroids. Furthermore, Black individuals often face the largest delay in steroid treatment. These findings indicate that there should be more of a concern for cohorts to be representative of the disease population, because evidently, Black patients with DMD are the last to receive care. It is well known that what makes a research study valid is that its findings are generalizable. For studies regarding DMD to be more efficacious, they have to be representative of the entire population. There needs to be a genuine and sustainable effort to retain diverse cohorts in observational and clinical studies. And this is just an overview of all the points I walked through. So in conclusion, we can say that research does need to emphasize the neurological and psychological aspects of DMD, DMD and its degenerative capabilities takes a toll on a child's mental health. Treatment such as care coordinators and myoblast transplantation therapy should be considered when seeking care for DMD. And lastly, research does need to be inclusive of underrepresented and underserved communities to better meet their needs. Thank you for watching.